state senator or mayor, you want to know more details about a bridge in your community, you can go to the website, put the specific information in about the bridge, request that information. We will then take that request, deliver it to the railroad, ask for a response about the bridge, when it was last inspected, what condition it's in, and then share it back. And that should happen within, that will happen next week on our website, and it'll be a 45-day turnaround for those local and state leaders who are interested in more information on their bridges. And then the notification stuff we just talked about is about giving first responders information about the products that are traveling through their state by rail. Now, this FAST Act, the Surface Transportation Bill, is a really big bill. It had all kinds of things in it, from new language about how Amtrak will do its accounting to the notifications language that's pretty significant, and frankly, we'll probably be working on implementing it for the next weeks, months, years. Okay.
Can I just say something that when you work in this for a while is obvious but not apparent for average citizens? You think of infrastructure as being public, right? But the rail infrastructure is, in many cases, not all, owned and maintained by the private rail companies. And so, you might call your mayor or your village president and say, boy, that looks a little fishy to me. What are you going to do about it? And they'll say, well, we don't actually own it, or we don't have any control over it. And that's why this transparency and this sharing of information, so that a city engineer, probably the most important person to be able to interpret whether these inspections are up to muster, it's available. But the idea that your infrastructure in your own community is owned by a company headquartered distantly can be very, very frustrating. And I think this is going to really improve the relations. And I can't tell you how many times concerned citizens, active groups like CARS, which is a rail safety advocacy organization, both in the western part of the state and the eastern part of the state, have shown, taken pictures of infrastructures that they're concerned about and said, get me some answers on this. And the FRA has been wonderful in terms of helping demand those, but now this will be a way to make that the standard, not the exception.
Senator, would you foresee for the first responders that find out what these trains are carrying and how to respond, and any kind of extra equipment or training or anything that they would need to be able to address those things, would you facilitate being able to get them any extra funds to get that extra equipment, or how would they be able to
And when I say an all-in approach to rail safety, as we see such increases in the volume of volatile fuels that are coming through our state, that is absolutely a piece of it. So I've introduced a separate rail safety bill that would represent, in my mind, a number of additional elements that we haven't gotten past yet that would enhance safety. And a lot of it has to do with requiring the rail companies, and they're doing a bit more of this now, but to have worst-case scenario plans, and that those be communicated to local first responders, local authorities, that they up the amount of training they're giving to first responders. There's a couple of sites where high-level training is provided, but if you looked at the Wisconsin communities that reside along the rails, only a fraction of them have actually gotten the opportunity to receive that training. There needs to be more in terms of community-to-community coordination, because a big event would be one that might be responded to. I mean, think of Alma is a very small community. The nearest trained group was from La Crosse, making their way up about an hour away. As the railroads were coming in, the FRA was coming in, all to respond. And so an all-in response will require a number of additional elements that we don't have today. But that's what politics and the political process is all about. We're airing these and we're pushing forward so that we can be as safe as possible.
It's a great question about the training. So one of the facilities that Senator Bowman was referring to is in Pueblo, Colorado. The railroads and the FRA partner together to maintain this facility, and it's got a bunch of different scenarios where first responders can go and train for that kind of scenario. So each week there are groups of first responders from all across the country who go out to Pueblo, Colorado. And they will actually, create what would be a crude derailment or an ethanol derailment. And they will train the first responders and allow them to sort of practice on that kind of incident. So there's more on our website, and we can send you some more information too if you're interested. But Senator Boland's exactly right. Some of the railroads are now stepping up and paying for first responders to receive that training, which is helpful. But we've got a long way to go in order to get the right amount of training for all of the first responders, because you can imagine these crude and ethanol routes stretch across the country.
And it's the railroad companies that pay for the training.
There's also grants that go, so it's a variety.
Administrator, can you talk, you had quite a demand for the STEP money, 34 eligible applications, totaling 50 million, you're able to hand out 10. Can you describe what the criteria were for the communities that are getting the grants? And my second part of my question is, what does it say to you that there's this larger demand?
Well, the sad reality is that is the case for all of our grant programs. So not just at the FRA, but at the Department of Transportation. So there are, whether it's this grade crossing grant program or the Tiger program, they're always oversubscribed. Communities are desperate for, funding for safety improvements or new infrastructure, improved, repaired infrastructure. So this is frequently the case. You're exactly right. For this grant, we've got 34 applications totaling about $50 million, and we can only give away 10, and with a maximum of $3 million per grant. So for this grant specifically, we were obviously looking for routes that are carrying hazardous materials. That makes you eligible. And also it was either grade crossing safety improvements or track improvements around grade crossings. Now, for this grant, we went with grade crossing improvements across the board. I don't think that any of them were actually track improvements. I personally feel like railroads should be paying for the track improvements themselves because they own the track, and that our grant money should be going to communities like this who are worried about grade crossing safety and pedestrians and vehicles that are crossing.
Okay.
Is there a second part of your question?
Well, I think you should answer the criteria, and so again, just to clarify what you're saying, that this is not a handout for the railroads necessarily today. Okay?
Yeah, no, these are grants that are going to communities to improve safety at grade crossings. So you're alluding to a potential applicants could come in asking for improvements to track. But for all of the grant awards, we chose to grant funds based on grade crossing improvements as opposed to track upgrades. Now, to your question about what we were looking for, I think probably everyone, any agency that's going through this discretionary grant program is looking for the most bang for their buck. And I will say that, and I know we have some of the grant writers here, and they deserve huge congratulations, and Wisconsin should be very proud of them because this was a great application. There was a lot of bang for your buck. The maximum amount for the grant was $3 million, and I think they got it up to like 2.98 or 2.99 or something, which is a very smart way to write a grant application. And we're upgrading 10 crossings, which is a lot. I mean, that is really significant, and there have been collisions with fatalities in this community. And so improving grade crossing safety has been a huge priority for the FRA. So when we can see a project that can make a big difference in a community like this, it's
Senator, I'm just wondering, I've had a lot of people come to me and address their concerns with safety when it comes to the railroads, whether it's pedestrians crossing or derailments and possible explosions. What are some of the comments that you heard from constituents that kind of propelled you to start this?
Well, I remember a very energetic meeting that I had in La Crosse very early on in my tenure in the United States Senate, where a railroad that runs from